Hello, this is John Lash, and you're listening to Future Primitive. I'm here today to talk about an exciting and remarkable project that is taking place on our planet. Some of you may have heard of it. It concerns the pilgrimage of the 13 Indigenous grandmothers. And this is quite an event taking place in the year 2006, but connecting humanity today with very, very ancient roots, in fact, timeless roots, leading us back to our origins and hopefully showing us something about what it means to be human. Now, on Future Primitive, we hope to be featuring some special interviews with the 13 Indigenous grandmothers. And we're able to do this because Joanna Harcourt-Smith, who is the main correspondent and creator of this site, one of the creators, has been closely connected with this event now for going on 2 years. And recently she was able to go to Mexico and participate in one of the events that the grandmothers are holding, actually on a global basis. They're doing it in various places around the world. So my role today is to be the one who interviews Joanna and asks her to tell us about the 13 grandmothers, give us a little background about how this project evolved, and then also tell us about her experiences with them recently in Mexico. Joanna?
I met the 13 international Indigenous grandmothers in Nambe in New Mexico a year ago exactly. And this is a group of women who are all grandmothers, great-grandmothers, and great-great-grandmothers who were brought together by a woman named Jo T. This woman, Jo T, had a dream, and she dreamt that she should be guided to find in the world 13 major women healers, medicine women, and medicine women who work with major medicine plants. When I speak of medicine plants, I'm speaking of the iboga of Africa, I'm speaking of the ayahuasca or daime of Brazil, I'm speaking about the plant marijuana, and I'm speaking about the magic mushrooms, or as it's called in Mexico, the Santo Niños. I might have forgotten one, but for the purpose of the moment, I will go on. So this woman, Jo T, was moved by a dream to bring together these medicine women who worked with the plants. And through relations, she was able to contact women from Brazil. There were 2 women from Brazil. She was able to contact 2 Lakota sisters, an amazing woman from the Arctic Circle, a Yupik grandmother, a Mayan grandmother, an African grandmother from Gabon, a Navajo grandmother, well, I'll just go on with the chat. So anyway, 13 of these women. And 13 of these women accepted to come together, and they accepted to come together first in upstate New York at a Buddhist center that is run, that belongs to Robert Thurman. And they came together to decide if they wanted to come together the first time, which was 1.5 years ago, and if they had a message to give the world. At that time, they did come to an agreement, and they came to an agreement that all of them had had prophecy and dreams since they were little girls, that at some point grandmothers would come together and would come out with a message of peace, and in a certain sense would put out a supplication for the planet, would pray. Their main function is to pray. And when I say pray, their main function is to do ceremonies in which they pray, and they pray to be of assistance to the planet, to Gaia.
Well, this is, it sounds to me like a most remarkable convergence. I sense that there are really deep forces of inspiration working in the lives of each of these women in the variously widespread cultures they come from. And bringing them together for this event is quite marvelous. We're very happy, Joanna, that you are able to be there already a couple of times with them, because we do intend to feature interviews with these grandmothers, with you and the grandmothers, periodically on Future Primitive for the next few months, and you're going to follow this event closely, I know. Just one more thing I would like to say is that we do share very strongly. I'm the main writer for metahistory.org, which is the sister site to Future Primitive. And one of the messages I've been developing on metahistory.org is the message of humanity's need to learn in humility and awe from the plant kingdom and from the sacred teachers of the plant world. And I emphasize in a number of my writings that the loss of that connection has been largely due to our disease, has largely contributed to our disease and our disorientation. So it's wonderful to hear that this event is coming about. Now I understand that there was a meeting in upstate New York and other meetings are planned. Would you tell us about the special significance of the meeting that you went to in Mexico?
I want to say, yes, John, the grandmothers are meeting more or less every 6 months, and they made a promise to each other that they would meet in each one's country, and when appropriate, they would partake in each other's healing plant medicine. And so when they met in Nambe, and I met them and had the privilege of interviewing some of them, I'm not aware of what plant they were sharing in New Mexico. I do know that the indigenous people of New Mexico and the Navajo and so on do use peyote and do peyote ceremonies. I was not invited to any of those ceremonies, but I do know that I was very, very excited to come to their invitation to a little village about 7 hours above Oaxaca in Mexico, 7 hours of windy roads, 7 hours of mountainous roads, to get to this village called Hauatla de Jimenez. Hauatla de Jimenez is the home of one of the grandmothers that I didn't speak of before. Her name is Julieta Casimiro. People call her Mama Julieta. Julieta Casimiro is a very, very, very respected shaman who works with the medicine she calls Santo Niños. The niños or the niñitos are mushrooms that grow on 100 kilometers radius, very specially in that area around Hauatla de Jimenez.
And just to brief some of our listeners on the special significance of this place, some of you may know this, others may not, but this little village in the hills of Mexico played an extremely important role in the revival of shamanism and in the message of indigenous wisdom coming into the modern world. This happened because of various convergence of various people in the early 50s, most notably a gentleman called R. Gordon Wasson, who went to Hauatla with his wife and participated in the mushroom ceremony with a woman called Maria Sabina. And as a result of that fantastic event, Wasson virtually single-handedly recaptured the connection, recaptured the ancient threads of these entheogenic cults of the Americas. And amazingly, and some of you may know this, but I never tire of repeating it, that the story of Wasson's mushroom adventures, including his personal account of visions that he had with Maria Sabinas, was given in a Life magazine article in 1954, which was a front-page article on Life magazine, if you can imagine that. Life magazine used to be a mainstream magazine in the United States. In any case, 50 years on from those events, we've advanced tremendously in our understanding of the importance of the sacred plant connection. So it's very, very meaningful that the Indigenous grandmothers decided to have one of their meetings at this place, which was really where it all began, where it all re-began 50 years ago.
Well, also for me, it was a very, very special experience because some of you know that I was very, very, very deeply involved with Timothy Leary in the early 70s. And Timothy Leary also traveled to Hauatla in, I think it was the very early 60s, and partook of the mushroom ceremony with Maria Sabina. And there are many accounts of the fact that this quote-unquote changed his life, and I think changed a tremendous amount of things in the folkloric life of the modern generation. Quickly, I'll say that Albert Hoffman himself also went to Hauatla, and he had a mushroom experience with Maria Sabina, and consequently he synthesized psilocybin for the Swiss laboratory for which he worked. So, jumping ahead here, the grandmothers arrive in Hauatla. I arrived at the same time they did, and it was absolutely beautiful. The Hauatla band, the music band was playing, children were singing. Mama Julieta, her daughter, and her granddaughter, that's just 2 years old, were dressed in their local costumes, and they received the grandmothers from Brazil, the United States, etc., with great emotion, and it was a very special moment. The next morning, so we stayed in these little hotels in this tiny town at the top of a mountain, and the next morning we crowded into Mexican camionetas, and we went higher up at the top of the village, and the Lakota grandmothers, the two Lakota sisters, and the Mayan grandmother led a ceremony. The Lakota grandmothers, one of the Lakota grandmothers had brought her son with her, Aloysius, who is also a shaman, and who was just back from doing shamanic sessions in Siberia. They sang to the sunrise, and it was extremely poignant, and basically their song and their prayer was directed to asking the planet what they could do for her. And it was a very, very poignant and beautiful moment.
Yes, it seems to me that there are many beautiful and remarkable things about this project, and perhaps the most outstanding to me is that these grandmothers are actually doing something. They're performing a ritual, and they know from the wisdom of their tradition that the earth responds to ritual and prayer. And that's a very beautiful thing to remember. We've all been hearing for some time, quite some years now, that indigenous people around the world are very alarmed by the illness of modern civilization, and that they are going. We've been told that they're going to come forth with some prophecy or some advice or some message in order to help us correct our insanity. And I don't really know personally if that has actually happened, but now it turns out that this other event is taking place, and it seems to me that's just exactly what we've been waiting for.
To cut to the chase, what was the most remarkable moment of my trip was that I got to go down into Mama Julieta's basement, which is prepared as a sanctuary for healing, and I got to share the mushroom, the Santo Niños, with 14 other people. I will be very discreet, and I will not say who those 14 other people were, or those 13 other people than myself were, but what I will say is that the room was filled with very, very, very powerful women and a few men, and that each person who spent several hours in that beautiful sanctuary basement, the intention of each person who was there was to invoke the feminine, and to invoke the feminine in terms of the planet, and to place herself or himself at the service of any healing that the feminine would like to express through her. And I feel extraordinarily blessed that my life led me to that moment in time in that basement. So I'm going to tell a little bit what the ceremony was like. We were lying down. Each of us had a mat and a pillow and a nice warm blanket, and the shaman, Mama Julieta, was in the middle of us, and with her assistant. Directly diagonally across from Mama Julieta was her daughter, dressed in white, and her daughter's husband stood at all times during the ceremony. He was the masculine counterpart to the mother and daughter, and I don't know if he ingested the Santo Niños, but I do know that he held the little saints in his hands, standing in his full power during the whole ceremony. So 14 candles were lit, and the room was full of flowers. Mama Julieta said to us that the flowers are the messengers of the feminine planet, and then she distributed little saucers to each one of us with the dose that she felt was appropriate for each one of us. And on each plate with the mushroom were 3 cocoa beans. Beautiful, plump, gorgeous cocoa beans, about about the size of the last phalange of my thumb. And she explained that we should ingest the cocoa beans first. We should crack the cocoa beans in our teeth first, and that the cocoa beans were the keepers of the door, and that we should ask the cocoa beans to take us through the door and entrust us into the hands of the Santo Niños, the little saints. So the room was darkened. Each candle was blown out, and the room was in absolute darkness. And I happen to know that the indigenous people from Hauatla who do these ceremonies believe that they have to be done absolutely in the dark. And we were told to lay back. After about 10 minutes, where Mama Julieta sang the rosary with her daughter, each one of them singing the song to the Virgin Mary, each one taking a turn. She was extremely hospitable and kind and asked if anybody wanted more mushrooms. And I can only speak for myself. I know I thought I would, and so I asked for more. And as I asked for more and held them in my hand, I was barely able. I ate a couple, and then I couldn't eat any more. And I laid back, and this incredibly gentle feeling came over me. What I could describe as very nurturing. It was like this pale ooze of nurturing blue light. I see you want to say something, John.
Well, I'm fascinated by the way that your description has taken me directly into this experience with you, and I understand it's something very intimate and something that we don't always talk about, and when we do talk about it, we do it with a great deal of modesty and respect and reverence, which I also sense in listening to you. And I believe the listeners out there will feel the same thing, and that they will understand that in broaching this subject and in following the worldwide pilgrimage of the Indigenous grandmothers, as Joanna is going to do, we're always doing it in this spirit of reverence, respect, and sobriety. So it's very, very touching. I'm very moved to hear the description that you're giving. Well,
thank you for bringing this up, John, because I want to say this. I want to say this once and for all on Future Primitive. I am sober. I value sobriety as the primary force in my life. It's the place from which I go into the world. And at certain times I believe that the entheogenic experience, the plant healing experience, it enhances my sobriety.
Well, that certainly resonates to my experience as well, Joanna, and it's a very important message. If we're going to take the risk, and it is a risk, and I'm going to take the responsibility to talk on some occasions on Future Primitive about the entheogenic experience. Of course, the site is not entirely dedicated to that by any means, but we will be talking about it as you follow and interview these wonderful women. And I think what you just said is the best possible guideline that you could give to any one of our listeners who's coming along on that journey with us. So I would like to say that this interview we're doing here today, at the beginning of June 2006, is the first of a series that Joanna will be doing, and we will keep you posted as these interviews emerge on the site, and we invite you to come along on this journey with us and to participate in the beauty and the power that these Indigenous grandmothers are offering to us at this time.
So I know I sort of left you hanging, telling about my experience. But what I want to say is that I partook in an experience that was extremely intimate and extremely profound, and an experience that belongs very much on Future Primitive, because it was an experience of creating a new way to be between humans, a new and very ancient way, but this very ancient way becomes new every time we do ceremony together, every time we create the sacred together. So we will talk some more soon, and I will be following, as John said, the pilgrimages of the grandmother.
Thank you very much, Joanna. We'll leave it at that for the moment, and we will have a second. I'll have a second talk with Joanna in which she'll continue to describe the events that happened in the wonderful Mexican village. Thank you. The main correspondent and creator of this site, one of the creators, has been closely connected with this event now for going on 2 years. And recently she was able to go to Mexico and participate in one of the events that the grandmothers are holding, actually on a global basis. They're doing it in various places around the world. So my role today is to be the one who interviews Joanna and asks her to tell us about the 13 grandmothers, give us a little background about how this project evolved, and then also tell us about her experiences with them recently in Mexico. Joanna?
I met the 13 international Indigenous grandmothers in Nambe in New Mexico a year ago exactly. And this is a group of women who are all grandmothers, great-grandmothers, and great-great-grandmothers, who were brought together by a woman named Jo T. This woman, Jo T, had a dream, and she dreamt that she should be guided to find in the world 13 major women healers, medicine women, and medicine women who work with major medicine plants. When I speak of medicine plants, I'm speaking of the iboga of Africa. I'm speaking of the ayahuasca or daime of Brazil. I'm speaking about the plant marijuana, and I'm speaking about the magic mushrooms, or as it's called in Mexico, the Santo Niños. I might have forgotten one, but for the purpose of the moment, I will go on. So this woman, Jo T, was moved by a dream to bring together these medicine women who worked with the plants. And through relations, she was able to contact women from Brazil. There were 2 women from Brazil. She was able to contact 2 Lakota sisters, an amazing woman from the Arctic Circle, a Yupik grandmother.
Hello, this is John Lash, and you're listening to Future Primitive. I'm here today to talk about an exciting and remarkable project that is taking place on our planet. Some of you may have heard of it. It concerns the pilgrimage of the 13 Indigenous grandmothers. And this is quite an event taking place in the year 2006, but connecting humanity today with very, very ancient roots, in fact, timeless roots, leading us back to our origins and hopefully showing us something about what it means to be human. Now, on Future Primitive, we hope to be featuring some special interviews with the 13 Indigenous grandmothers. And we're able to do this because Joanna Harcourt-Smith, who is
a Mayan grandmother, an African grandmother from Gabon, a Navajo grandmother, well, I'll just go on with the chat. So anyway, 13 of these women. And 13 of these women accepted to come together, and they accepted to come together first in upstate New York at a Buddhist center that is run, that belongs to Robert Thurman. And they came together to decide if they wanted to come together the first time, which was a year and a half ago, and if they had a message to give the world. At that time, they did come to an agreement, and they came to an agreement